Hey Untold Radio Network fans, want exclusive perks and to support our channel? Introducing our YouTube membership program with 3 amazing levels. Get loyalty badges that level up to different cryptids the longer you're a supporter. How cool is that? You'll also get access to custom Bigfoot emojis and priority in chat. Upgrade to Backstage Pass for exclusive wallpapers, photos, status updates, discounted books, and merchandise. Go all in with the producer level for everything mentioned plus member shoutouts. Ready for an enhanced experience? Join now, pick your membership level, and let's make this journey even more exciting together.
The paranormal, UFOs, monsters, mysteries. You're listening to Talking Weird. And now, from a cabin deep in the Northwoods, your host, Dr. Dean Bertram.
Good evening, everybody. Welcome to Talking Weird on the Untold Radio Network. I'm your host, Dean Bertram, and we have a very special, if somber show tonight, although it will be filled with, I'm sure, interesting information, and it's definitely probably the most important show I think I've done this year. My guest, we've had her on before we came onto the Untold Radio Network. She's one of the loveliest people I've ever met. She's a professional quantum hypnotherapist, an open channel. She offers other professional psi services, including Energy Alchemy, ET Contact, and Paranormal Experience Counseling. I first met her at Midwest Weird Fest, a festival that I run in Eau Claire, Wisconsin, a number of years ago, when a regular attendee of the festival had recommended a film she was in called Alien Abduction Answers and put me in contact with the incredible director, John Yost. And we were lucky enough to have the world premiere of that film, and it won Best Documentary at the festival that year. I was also fortunate enough to meet so many people who were in that film, many alien experiences and other members of John's crew. And one thing I could tell from them is they were all incredibly close. I'd never seen a group of film professionals, and I'm in the film industry, that felt that much like a genuine family. There seemed to be such a loving bond amongst them. And Debz Shakti, who's joining us on the show tonight to talk about John and to talk about some of her own work, the guest I introduced was clearly a major supporter of John, and John clearly just adored her. They seem like such incredibly close creative collaborators. And we've had terrible news recently that John is suffering from an advanced stage of pancreatic cancer. Now, which is terrible news, but the good news is that there is a treatment, a very new experimental treatment, which has a very high success rate and is able to almost certainly save him. But the downside is it's very expensive. So we'll start a little bit by talking about that. So first, I'd like to introduce Debz. Thank you so much for being here, Debz.
Thank you so much, Dean. This is such a pleasure and an honor to have you spend time with me tonight to talk about these things. Thank you so much.
Oh, well, thank you. I was heartbroken when I heard of John's situation, but I was happy to know that there is a real potential for him to be cured, because I know there are leaps and bounds in this type of technology these days, and people can get cured who 5 years ago couldn't get cured. Of course, one of the great problems today is medical technology is very expensive.
Yeah.
So we'll get into it a little bit, but maybe we'll just start by showing that's the GoFundMe account. You can go there now and you can make a contribution. Is that correct, Debz? I believe, for John.
It is. It's been we're just radically marketing this to every place we know and to every person we know, asking for help, because this treatment is very, very expensive, and of course, no insurance or anything is going to help pay for that. So it's all out of pocket. But John is so beloved in many communities, and we're just very grateful. We're about, I think, a third of the way there to help pay for his treatments so far. So, oh, you're muted. You're muted, Dean.
Oh, thank you. I
There you
just
go.
said that's excellent that people are actually contributing, and
Mhm.
we're getting close to that mark. I mean, I'm a big believer in the power of prayer as well, and I think in many ways prayer can be answered in different ways. It can probably be answered as just a straight out cure, but it can also be answered by giving the road, I think, to a cure. And it seems this path
Absolutely.
is there to offer John that possibility. So
Absolutely. 4 months ago, I had no idea that this treatment even existed. Uh, and of course, 5 or 6 months ago, we didn't know he was ill, had no indication he was ill. And so it was a big shock when he did find out he had a lot of pain and everything, but he's a very stoic Irishman, as you know, and he just thought he'd had ulcers or something. But very quickly, he was sure that there was something else, and I kept saying, "You need to go and have it checked." And when he did, they said, "You have advanced aggressive pancreatic cancer." The crazy thing about that is that they said, if because he was shocked, he said, "Well, what happens now?" And they said, "Well, if you don't do, what we normally do, which is chemotherapy and radical surgery, which would cut out several parts of his body. And then he would have to be on all kinds, he'd have to be catheterized, he'd have to have a colonoscopy or whatever, colostomy bag, be on all kinds of uh, vaccines and infusions for the rest of his life." They said if he did that, they could possibly extend his life 2 to 3 years. That was the highest prognosis. And if he didn't, they gave him 10 or 11 months to live. And he thought about it a long time, and it was very expensive still. And he thought, well, why would I do that and then die and leave my wife and my children with all of these horrible expenses? There's got to be something else. As you know, he's a bibliophile and an extreme researcher, and he got busy and literally, through our prayers, intentions, and meditations, he found this therapy, which it's revolutionary. They have like an almost 100% success rate for the last 22 years. It's
wow.
new, but it was very boutique up until a couple of years ago.
Well, I'm glad that he's able to find a place in the program, right? But it's just up to everybody to try to make that a financial reality. I would like to think if I was in a situation like this, that people would rally and help me, because I think we live in a time where we're far more atomized than communities used to be. I
Yes.
think it's important to look to other people in our community, and in this case, it's the paranormal community, and it's probably the alien abduction community, and it's the people who are interested in these type of things, to think if I was in that situation, I would love it if the community came to my aid. And it doesn't have to be a fortune. I mean, I'm assuming if people can even give like $50, it's wonderful. I'm sure people can even give $20, it's wonderful. Like if you can whatever you can
Exactly.
afford, give something.
What I've been saying to people, just even on Facebook, we're doing it across all social media platforms, as you can imagine. But even on Facebook, I think I have, I've maxed out my followers. But if everybody who follows me only gave $5, he'd go way over. So, and now we're just encouraging people, because this treatment plan it's 12 weeks. It goes till he just started it last week. It goes until, well, 2 weeks ago. It goes until October, or end of September. If everybody would just even vow to themselves to give $10 a month till it's over, again, he'd be well over and would be able to get back on his feet again and start making films. Because, not only did he have to move himself and his wife to Arizona, it's in Scottsdale, it's called Invita. The place is called Invita Treatment Center. But they had to get an apartment. They had to get a rental car. They have to live, they have to have food and everything and pay for these treatments. And he's off work for, 3 or 4 months. So no income, as a filmmaker yourself, you're self-employed. You don't have anything. If you don't work, you don't have anything. So, but basically, we realized right after the the first film, Alien Abduction Answers, became very popular, thanks to your help, by the way. That really launched us. Once it became a very popular film and people started really loving it, he got a download and said, there's 2 other films. This is the beginning step of this process. There are 2 other films in a trilogy that need to be made. And it really was the call to action that he was given through his ET contact as a child, but didn't realize it until he went through the process he went through that you see in the film. Now, on top of everything else, he's on fire to get well and probably make films about this, because people don't know. You know, they get sick, they go to the conventional doctor, nothing wrong with that, but they don't know that there are other options, and there are other options. In fact, there are other options all over the world where it's routine. But here in our country, in the United States, it's not. So unfortunately, but yeah.
Yeah, no, I'm certainly nobody who's qualified to give medical advice, but I personally am always reluctant to go through traditional medical. Now, if I fell off a roof and broke my
Oh,
leg, I'm
of
sure I'd be
course.
the first person to go to the ER, but I'm reluctant to become part of what seems to be a very commercial medical system. Like, you seem to go in with an
Mm,
issue and then you just keep being medicated and medicated and
mhm,
medicated. At least people I know in
yeah.
this country, that's my experience. But I'm still glad that there's modern medical technology, and I'm glad there's advanced programs like this that John was able to find. Now,
Yeah.
do you think that have you been conscious, or has John been conscious of people praying for him and people doing
Yes.
those type of things that have helped, or have helped guide him towards this, as he
Yes.
felt? Or
Absolutely. You know, John was raised in a very religious upbringing, but of course, as he's gone through his growing up years and had these experiences, he's become extremely spiritual, which, as you know, is, I think it's much less limited. It's unlimited as opposed to being adhering to just one religious affiliation. He's deeply spiritual, and um, so he's open to everything, and he prays every day. We all do. But on summer solstice, the 21st, um, he agreed to let me host a global group prayer and healing service for him on Zoom. And we had people from all over the world join. And I led a group healing session. It was and there was energy coming through, not just me, but through the star beings that I channel. I was not present, consciously while it was happening, and it was an incredible healing service, and it's still out there. People are still using it as kind of a guide. There's a guided journey there that helps them. But during the session, he literally felt the healing coming through, and he continues to feel it. There are healers all over the world now working with him, sending energy, and tons of prayer groups praying for him. And he says that he feels it. And I tune in every once in a while. I can feel it. It's just so strong. So we know that, I work. My work is done from a quantum physics perspective and a spiritual perspective. I know that we are all made of the same energy, and so we're all connected, and we can use that energy however we want if we have a focused intention. When you get a huge group of people, like we're getting all of these hundreds of thousands of people, praying for him and leading healing groups for him and everything. Even just the excitement about the way the funds are building and everything to pay for the treatments, it amplifies. And when you amplify energy, it becomes more effective. So yeah.
absolutely. I mean, I'm more traditional probably in my prayers. I pray from a Christian perspective, but I've been praying
Mhm.
for John all the time, and I'm sure there are many people like myself who've
Mhm.
been praying for him as well. I'm also somebody who's always been interested in the idea that consciousness or thought affects our reality. And I think that's a big part
Yes.
of your quantum hypnosis as well. The idea that we do have this very strange interaction with the physical world around us, where our
Mhm.
own mind isn't separate from it. Maybe you can talk a little bit about how that works.
Right. I mean, well, I like to tell people we're all infinite, unlimited energy beings, basically, and we're all part of a larger energy system. Just like your cells in your body are individual and they have individual purposes or group purposes, but they're still part of your body. I believe that's what we are. But in the quantum field, I like to use this metaphor. You're an energy being, and you came here to this particular frequency or dimension or construct to have some experiences. But just like a person being flying to the moon, for instance, they can't just get out of their rocket ship and walk around on the moon as a human being. They would die. They have to have a specialized spacesuit. So I call this body mind complex your spacesuit. Your physical body is your spacesuit, so you can navigate in this environment well and have these experiences of being a physical being. But the operating system is up here in the brain. That's the hard. It's like a flash drive, though, and the software is your consciousness. But there's only so much that can fit in that tiny flash drive. What people don't understand is you are also the cloud. All information exists in the quantum field. So if you look at it from like a computer standpoint, the quantum field is the cloud. It holds all information, and we have access to that. But you have to understand how to use the search engine right. So there's certain ways to get to that information, to get to the resources that you need, so that your spacesuit can work better, or you can have greater understanding and wisdom. Part of that access for me is learning special techniques. Prayer is one, meditation is one, yoga, breath work. There are all kinds of different ways to access the cloud, and multiple ways to put them together to access it more effectively. As you know, if you put the right search words in, you get more specific information, right? So that's what we're doing here. Um, the spacesuit sometimes needs repairs. I just went through 3 weeks ago, I just got some new bionic parts put in my right hip because, thank you, Western medicine. There was nothing that it was going to take a long time if I was going to heal it the other way, and I don't have time for that. So I'm using those methods to complement what the medical technology did for me. But I literally wore those parts out being an athlete all my life, plain and simple. You don't run your car without oil in the engine. Eventually it starts to fall apart. That's what I was doing.
I'm
So,
glad you're
uh,
able to get that surgery done. I've known other
oh,
people
thank
who've
you.
been very happy with hip and knee and shoulder, surgeries
Yeah.
were unthinkable, 50 years ago, and now it's like they've got a new lease on life. So that is, I was being critical before of some aspects of modern medicine, but
Oh,
that's
yeah.
certainly not an aspect I'm critical of. I think that's
No, that's one of the examples. You break your leg, you can pray it away, or you can have it set and put in a cast, and you can still pray, and I know it accelerates the healing. But yeah, there are things that sometimes we have to do to repair or improve the spacesuit. And what John's going through, I believe, is an improvement for the physical spacesuit. But my goodness, what's really happening is he's getting an upgrade for his operating system. Because again, he's been put here, or he put himself here, if you want to think that way, for a specific purpose, and that is to help the world to move forward.
Has he talked to or mentioned to you that he's had any contact since he's been diagnosed with his pancreatic cancer? Is he aware of being in contact with any other entities himself at the moment, or?
That's a really good question. I don't get to talk to him very often or for very long because he is extremely fatigued and in extreme pain. I'm just going to be real with you. Um, so when we talk, it's in snippets. But what I will say is several times he has insinuated that he's had some very unusual experiences since this happened. And in fact, even he self-diagnosed himself one day when we were talking. I thought maybe it was his liver. And he said, I'm being told it's my pancreas. 3 years ago, John Yost would have never said something like that. He thought this was all just, woo-woo stuff. He wasn't into it. But he's been getting a lot of guidance. So you know what, Dean? That's a really good question. And that's something I'm going to ask him next time I talk to him.
Yeah, please wish him well for me as well. I mean, I
Oh,
Facebook communicate with him, but I haven't spoken to him on the phone for quite some time. You said, and on a cheerier note, because at least it looks like it's all going in the right direction, as long as people can contribute, as I think they should do, as much as they can. It's
mhm.
funny because we all give to crowdfunding campaigns for movies and for books and for
Sure.
gizmos. We all do it. And here's a crowdfunding campaign which is literally going to save somebody's life. We don't seem to blink when it's like, oh, I would like that new camera part. I'm going to make a pledge to that. Or
Mhm.
this comic book looks cool. I'm going to contribute to that. But this is
Yeah.
one which actually can not change one person's life, but his entire family and all the people that he touched. As I said in the introduction, I don't think I'd ever seen a filmmaking family, and I mean that by different people who aren't biologically related but have become a family,
Yeah.
as close as you guys were at the world premiere of Alien Abduction
Mhm.
Answers at Midwest Weird Fest.
Yeah.
Like, you were all so clearly a unit. I was quite impressed by it, to be honest.
Oh, thank you. I'm still in awe of the whole thing. And again, I think, you go back to talking about things that might make people uncomfortable, although on this channel, I doubt that. But I do believe that our meeting and our work together and our growing family, as you've put it, has been something of a divine intervention. I mean, it just all keeps happening more and more purposefully. And as far as the people in the film that you met, we do call each other family. We're all super duper close still. In fact, they're all my best friends, including him. He's like my bestest buddy. So that just doesn't happen in most other places. It's very unusual.
Are you guys going to be involved in I know you said he has 2 other films that he's talking about doing. Is it gonna be a continuation of some of your stories as well, or is it
Mhm.
going in a different? Oh, excellent.
Yeah, yeah, no, as far as I know, that was the plan. I was associate producer for the first one, and he's asked me to be the same for the other two, just because there is a progression of what we're doing with the information. The first film was about, oh, wow, this is actually real, and I'm not the only person having this, and neither are you. Uh, Most of us, maybe all of us, are having this happen to different degrees, and so that was the first one. The next one is, okay, now that we know it's real and we know we're not alone, now, what do we do with it? And it's going to be exploring the different types of modalities about how people do have contact or initiate contact, which that's kind of the way we like to go, is, empowering people, not just, oh my God, this happened to me, but I am initiating it. And then the third one will be about the how do we help the world with this? How do we move the world past the dark place where it is right now, or the seemingly dark place, into what we know could be a golden age of humanity, where we do join kind of a cosmic community, uh, which we're very certain that's what we're supposed to be doing. So I will be involved, God willing, and many of the people in the film will too. But you'll be seeing lots and lots of other really cool people in this community. And what's really neat for you is it's not just going to be about ET contact. It's going to be about consciousness. That's what this is really about. We are firm. I don't even want to say believers. I know for a fact that all of the things that people call paranormal, uh, weird, woo woo, um, it's consciousness, and it's all, I mean, it's just other I believe it's other iterations of our own being, you know?
Yeah, I'm not 100% sure what any of it is. I don't doubt people have experiences, but one of the hypotheses I throw out there is I wonder if a lot of these things interjecting themselves into our reality are almost like an intentional glitch or message from the Matrix to let us know we're kind of trapped in this cage and
Yes.
there's something else there. It's one of the
Time to
ideas
wake
I
up.
throw out. Yeah.
No, I agree with you. And I think you and I have had this conversation before, even at Weird Fest. This includes things like not just angels or ETs or ghosts, if you will, spirits, but the wee folk, fairy,
Absolutely.
elves, anything you can imagine that is in our lore, I believe is part of this. So,
Yeah, I take the old fairy faith very seriously. There seems to have been so much experience with some non-human intelligence that
oh
whole
yeah.
doctrines were made on how you should and how you shouldn't behave, and it's very fascinating. Today, whatever this stuff is, I was only talking about this on somebody else's show the other day, is that in days of yore, people kind of were taught methods to deal with the other. Today, your average person, if they're driving down a highway tonight and see four strange little men next to a metallic sphere, they don't know what to do with that information.
I know.
They're not really prepared in the modern West on how to actually engage with the other. But people used to have an understanding of what you could and couldn't do or what you should and shouldn't do. And it seems to be something that's missing from the average person's, consciousness today.
Precisely. I think that's what the second film's idea is there are many paths up the mountain to make contact with these different forms of consciousness, but you do need to know how to comport yourself. There are I don't want to say rules, but there are ways of doing it where you don't get, into a bind. Like with the fairy world, the old time fairy world, there were definite rules of etiquette, and if you didn't follow them, then woe be to you, right? So your experience wasn't as good. So that's kind of the idea, but I also believe now. I keep saying the word believe, but I don't. I just know because this is the guidance I've been being given too, is that that's what we've been working on, what our focus has been on is just but one small piece of why he's here and he's, a revolutionary person. He's going to start sparking where other people hopefully will start uh, doing their own thing about this too. We are about consciousness and about waking people up and helping them understand that they are not limited little human beings on this little planet that's rife with problems, and that's all there is, you know?
Did you guys, after the success of that film, because it really blew up. That film
Yeah.
was everywhere.
Yes.
Do you know if maybe you yourself or John or other people involved in the production had other experiences reach out to them with questions or wanting to tell
Oh,
their own tales or
heavens, yes. I get hundreds of emails, texts, and messages myself every day. I
wow.
am so overwhelmed. I try very hard, and I'm sure John gets 10 times that. But because of the work I did with John in the film and with the other experiencers, a lot of people have reached out. I can't keep up with my work, and I'm so grateful because that was I found out many years ago that's my purpose is to help people through these things, to help them understand and to actually see them clearly, and there's always a call to action with these experiences. I don't care whether you're having an experience with a haunting in your house or, you thought you saw an elf under the morel mushroom in the forest. There's a reason for that, and it's a wake-up call for something to break you out of your mundane human existence and do something purposeful. So I have been very, very, very busy, and so has he. And I'm grateful. And when I can't keep up, I refer to other people just because there aren't enough of us out there to help right now.
Do you get people who ever contact you who have been, like, terrified or traumatized by the situation? And if so, how do you go about helping people like that deal with an experience which
Yeah.
seems so out of the ordinary for them?
Yeah, I'd say about 65% of the experiencers who contact me do so because they had something that was scary or confusing. Whether it's in childhood or it was yesterday to a 50-year-old housewife. Um, I believe that most of the terror comes from the fact that our culture from birth indoctrinates us to believe anything that is different than you or not part of the homogenous culture that we live in should be feared and is after you. It's something to be defended against, right? So, and then put in there all the Hollywood mumbo jumbo, especially about ETs and alien abduction and all of that. There's just almost a global consciousness of an idea of what that should be like now. And so, yeah, over 50%, definitely, probably 65% of the people who contact me do so because they're afraid, or like John, have lived in fear and have been living a lie for decades. And so when I hear from a person, I always take them at face value. I believe them. I don't second guess. I don't question. I don't think, oh, that one's kind of, I don't know, maybe they're testing me. I always take people at face value. And then we do some investigative, you know, conversation. And as you know, I'm telepathic, I'm psychic, I have all of these clairs, so I can pretty much tell what's going on in the person, even if they don't, even if they're not able to. And then if they resonate with me and want to work with me, then we go in and do some session work, and it always seems to turn things around for them because once they go into the cloud, if you will, it's the quantum field. But once we go into that and you see things from a zoomed out perspective where you can see how all the pieces fit together and you see them clearly, not just from the way your mind translated it, or maybe your parents when you were a child translated it for you, it's a whole different story. And healing across the board happens. But almost to a person, they come away with a big sense of purpose and something to do afterwards. So it's been very fulfilling work.
It's something which fascinates me, and you touched on it a little bit then, is that this overabundance of science fiction type motifs of what we were to expect with aliens and what an alien looks like and how an alien's going to behave.
Right.
Do you find that that expectation can actually not just affect perhaps the person's feelings about the encounter, but if somehow our consciousness can affect reality and we're plugged into it, do you find that that type of popular culture actually affects some people's experiences? Like they almost project or they almost co-create the reality with whatever this other consciousness is, or?
I absolutely do. It's not a one-way street. And just, again, you and I have had this conversation before. Um, Depending on where you are in the timeline of this place, the history of this place, contact with these other forms of non-local consciousness, if you will, seems to take on the flavor and shape and color of the belief system of the time. So, back in Egyptian times, they were sky gods, the Hopi and the Navajo had the underground ant people, people in Celtic lands had the fairy folk. And I'm not saying that they don't all exist, but it seems to be like whatever the belief system is or the cultural archetypes, symbols are, that seems to be how it's translated in the human brain. Now, whether these beings uh, pick that from our brains and take on those forms because they feel like it might be helpful, or as you have intimated, and as I believe, what we focus on is what our reality becomes. That's our projection of, we're literally projecting our own reality in this matrix. So, if all you've seen all your life are scary, slant-eyed aliens who look like, they came from the swamp, that's what your encounter is probably going to look like. So,
Yeah, no, I think that's accurate. I also often wonder when I read some encounters about it's interesting. This isn't exactly necessarily about abduction, but it's about the broader paranormal field. Often these things seem to go out of their way, and whether it's a Bigfoot or whether it's an ET or whether it's a fairy or a dogman or the Blessed Virgin Mary, they seem to go out of their way to get our attention. It
yes.
seems like, we wouldn't be having these experiences. They don't seem to be accidental. It seems like these
Oh,
things are
no.
pushing into our reality and saying, "Hey, look at me, I'm here."
Yeah. Yeah. No, I totally agree with you. Um, I will say I had an extraordinary experience last year about this time. Well, it was in September, at one of the retreats that I was leading for ET contact. It was a CE5 retreat, a contact retreat. And so we were, in a group looking for lights in the sky and other paranormal type things. We had all kinds of contact over several nights. But one of the weirdest things that happened were on the break. I like to go out into the woods. It's the place where we are is surrounded by the big North Woods. I like to go out in the woods and walk and see if I can sense any beings like the fairy folk or the Bigfoot, the Janu or whatever. And I did have some contact with those. But as I was coming back to the circle, I noticed a big part of my group were kind of over here on the other side by another piece of the forest. So I went over to get them and bring them back to the circle. And they all were dressed like the people that I was with, but they were all standing just staring at the forest, and they were very quiet. And so I thought, oh, they must be making contact with someone. So I was quiet. I walked up, and it was very cold there in that spot. And suddenly I realized, oh, I don't hear any frogs or crickets or anything. I don't hear anything. I don't hear these people breathing. And so I touched the shoulder of the guy I thought was my friend, and went to whisper, "What's happening?" And he turned to me, and there was no face. And he just
Gosh.
what I got was, "It's okay, but go back to the circle." And so it was almost like they were cardboard cutouts of my group, but they weren't my group. And when I turned and went back to the circle, they were all in the circle waiting for me. So what did that mean? Well, I think what it meant was there were beings there, and they didn't want to scare me, by being some kind of weird form uh, as I was leading the group, but they also wanted me to know they were there. So it was incredible. I'm still trying to figure that one out.
I got goosebumps from that one, actually. That was a bit spooky, that story.
It's cool though. I'm like, okay, did I see something that was happening in the near future? Did I see an alternate reality of what we were doing? Because they all are happening in the same place at the same time, and maybe I just had some bleed through. Whatever it was very paranormal. Uh, but whoever it was, whatever it was, took what I found to be familiar, my group, and put kind of the vestiges of them on when they realized I was approaching them.
Yeah, that's very telling that these things are able to, to present in different ways. It's something which always fascinates me. Have you had I know you don't like dwelling on the negative, and I don't want to either, but have there been experiences you've had and you've thought, "I better back out of this one, like this doesn't feel like that I should be having this experience," or
I've never ever had a scary or terrifying experience personally. Most of the people I work with have. So I'm not going to say they don't happen. But what I can say is I have had some, especially as an adult, that literally made no sense at all and really left me wondering, like this one. Um, and there was one where I was coming back from leading a CE5 group here in Missouri, and my drive home after the event, which was a very wonderful event, had a lot of contact. I was super high on the energy driving home, but it was in the middle of the night. It's 2 a.m. Takes about an hour to get to my home from where we were in this rural location. And suddenly out in the middle of nowhere, it looked like the deck of an aircraft carrier with all these lights on it. I'm out on the middle of a lonely highway, no other cars. And I thought, wow, that's weird. I don't remember that being there for some reason. I thought that. And then instantly my car was on the deck of this thing. And then I realized, oh, this is this is a craft, I guess, or something.
Gosh.
And I don't remember the beings, but I remember very much about the technical aspects of this huge lit up thing, and my car was on it. And then suddenly I'm in my driveway and only like 2 minutes had elapsed. So I was an hour away from my house and suddenly I'm in my driveway with, instead of missing time, it's compressed time. And I don't know if maybe, my friends, my star family thought, you know what, it's too late. She shouldn't be driving and we're just going to help her out and get her home. Or just to say, hey, your experience wasn't over yet and we're going to give you a finale. But that one it was a little, I don't want to say scary, but it was a little unnerving.
Oh, I
Because I'm
bet.
like, wow. And, my gas gauge wasn't low. I was driving at the time a big old gas guzzler SUV. It just, literally, I'm sure my car was taken with me in it and dropped in my driveway.
It's interesting that you had a time compression situation then, as you termed it, and that's, of course, quite common in fairy faith. I think people often mistake missing time for the type of experiences people had in fairy lore. They didn't really have
Yeah.
missing time, but they would find when they were in the other world, when they were with the
Mhm.
fairies, the time moved differently in there than it did in this outside world. Is that something you've had other type of experiences with, this
Yes.
alteration of time?
All the time. Yeah. Even when I was a kid, but certainly as an adult, when I knew to pay attention, and now I always pay attention. If I'm starting to have an experience, I try to take note of the time and other, uh, quantitative data so that I can compare at the end of it. But what I can say is that the when you think about it from a scientific perspective, we're talking about relativity, right? If you go on a spaceship out and you travel, if you're able to at the speed of light or greater than the speed of light, you don't age. You might age very minimally, but when you come back, everybody is gone, right? So why is that any different than what we're talking about here? I think what we're talking about is a great example of that aspect of our existence, of the whole existence of everything.
Yeah, it seems to suggest to me as well, if this is more about consciousness and less about physical matter,
Oh
then
yeah.
those normal laws of space and time probably don't apply. Like I can think myself right now, I can imagine myself getting a glass of water from the kitchen sink. But for me to do that in reality, I got to get up, I got to walk down, I got to turn on the sink, I got to
Mhm.
burn all this energy, I got to move in matter, and I'm actually moving in space. I'm playing with matter, and it's taking me time to do that. But in
Mhm.
consciousness, I'm doing it right now, but obviously I'm bound by the physical realm. Perhaps when we're interacting with these other things,
Yeah.
we're not bound anymore in this physicality. So all those laws of matter and energy and space and time don't apply in that scenario, perhaps.
Right. I think that's why I loved the first well, I loved all the Matrix movies, but when I first saw the first Matrix movie, I was so relieved. I'm like, that explains exactly what's happening. in life, but people are so tied to the adherence to third dimensional physics and what we know of it that they can't believe past that. But and that's what's been so frustrating. I'm sure in your work too, is that I get a lot of skeptics who say, "Well, you don't have any physical proof of what you're talking about." And like, their third dimensional science works to prove things in the third dimension, but we're talking about things that work outside of this dimension, many other frequencies, and we don't have the metrics yet to measure it or to quantify it. That's merely all that is. It doesn't mean it doesn't exist. It means we just don't have a way to prove it.
Yeah, we do live in a culture where science has become king. Like, we hear phrases all the time, I follow the science, don't question the science.
Yeah.
97% of scientists agree. But as
Yeah.
somebody who has a background, as I think a real Fordian, like, I've read the books of Charles Fort, I've liked them
Yes.
collection of just anomalous stories. I like them that those anomalous stories to Fort prove that science was incapable of dealing with these mysteries because it's bound
Exactly.
in certain boxes which it can't look outside of. And the famous philosopher of science, Thomas Kuhn, said some 40 years
Yes.
later, science is trapped in its paradigms. A paradigm stays until too many things threaten it and then it collapses and a new paradigm grows. But the
Yeah.
new paradigm isn't necessarily any more correct. It's just the more popular one and it explains some of the anomalies, but it doesn't mean it's any more correct than the one before. So I never have a
Yeah.
problem when things don't fit a scientific paradigm. I know it bothers a lot of people, but to me, it's like, well, I've read enough of the literature to go, this is something different than this
Yeah.
is outside of our current paradigms. Maybe one day we'll have a paradigm that explains it, but it seems to be
Perhaps.
outside of them, and we might never. I mean, it doesn't bother me even.
Perhaps I think, no, I know life continues to evolve. All of life is constantly evolving, growing, changing. And so we're just kind of lagging behind as we develop new paradigms. Exponentially, life is leaving us behind a trail of breadcrumbs to find it. So I kind of hope we don't ever know all of the answers, because I think it's fascinating to try to make these discoveries. But yeah, that's why. And you know, I love everyone and I respect everyone. And there are many people who, point their fingers at me and go, "Well, you're just crazy because you can't prove anything." I'm like, "Well, you know what? The one thing I can say is direct experience is the best teacher. And until you have a direct experience of something like this, you're probably going to be a little skeptical, unless you're a very open-minded person or a philosopher already or something." But I think everybody's starting to have direct experiences. It seems to be very prevalent now.
I was going to ask you that next, actually. I was about to ask you, do you think there's an acceleration in this type of phenomenon interacting with us?
Absolutely. As I said, I can't keep up. And I'm constantly having invitations to speak and to have interviews, and people are wanting me to finish writing the several books that I've been trying to write. I can't. I just don't have time for it. But it's because of this acceleration. Some people call it the quickening, or the great reset or the great awakening, whatever you call it. Something definitely is happening in a more accelerated fashion. And it's kind of like the 100th monkey thing. And, we live in a technological age where people are able to share their information freely, real time. So why wouldn't it change that rapidly? So
Yes, speaking of technology, that brings me back to something else I was going to ask you about when you were talking about your experience with that craft, which took you home in compressed time. You got home very quickly. Do you think when people see physical crafts in an alien abduction experience or just in a sighting experience or in a contact experience, whatever we want to call it, do you think there actually is a physical technology, or do you think that's just a projection of technology because we're more comfortable seeing, or we expect to see something like that?
I say yes, and because I don't think there is one answer for any of it. And I think that, no, I know this. Everything is infinitely dimensional. And so whatever your experience is at the moment is where your mind, where your consciousness is focused. I know that there are physical craft, but most of what people are calling craft or orbs or whatever, I believe they can be projections of the energy of the consciousness that is trying to interact with us. And the physical craft, some of the physical craft that I've been on literally is consciousness. It may be melded with the consciousness of the beings who are actually on them, or it is a consciousness of its own. I've had that experience, which was just, it blew my mind. But I think it's all consciousness. Everything that exists has consciousness. So,
Do you think there's a danger to our human consciousness through perhaps things like Elon Musk talking about giving us brain chips, or the danger of AI forming some type of singularity with us? Do you think that presents an existential threat to who we are as people, as humans, as spiritual beings?
well, again, I believe we're infinitely dimensional and there are infinite versions of each of us, going through all these experiences. So, yes, on some of those timelines, absolutely. If that's what you're interested in or afraid of, whatever you're focusing on is going to be your experience more than likely, or it's going to be part of your experience. So I try to tell people stay away from fear-based stuff. If you're interested, like if you're really interested in the implications of AI, for instance, go ahead and research it, but don't do it out of fear, like I have to protect us. Ultimately, AI it's just another form of consciousness, you know, and it's going to do just like we do. You know, we're all conscious, and look at how we're, acting. Some of us are not acting so wonderfully well as humans. So again, it's about your vibrational state. I know this is starting to sound woo woo, but it literally is about how you hold your energy and how you hold your focus and your consciousness, your conscious awareness. If it's focused on making the world better or making new discoveries or helping other people or whatever, that's the stuff that's going to come to you. And these pieces get filled in because I believe, the universe is conscious and it's part of you and you're part of it. So you can't help but kind of be a self-referring system.
That's very interesting. There was a recent 2-volume book, actually 3-volume, but the third volume is essentially just notes and index, and that was called Ecology of Souls by Joshua Cutchin, who I've had on Talking Weird a couple of times. And Cutchin's very scholarly. He's super switched on guy. And he made all these interesting comparisons, like almost an historical overview of the paranormal and UFOs and all of these type of beliefs. And he found what he thought was a through line of death throughout all of them. He thought that all of these things had something to tell us about, about death. They were all connected to where we were going afterwards. Is that something that's borne out in your work and research, do you think?
Absolutely, it is. In fact, the great Whitley Strieber, who's in our film and is such a wonderful friend, his wife, Annie, was the one who kind of gave him the idea to think about and pose this discussion is that, ET contact has a lot of connections with our dead. And he's postulated many times, are they one and the same? And I tend to think they are, because the dead aren't dead. They're just, everything is made of the same energy, and energy just changes its form and function. It never dies. It just changes its form and function uh, by virtue of its vibrational state. So the dead could be, coming through as, fairy folk or ETs or angels or ghosts or whatever. And because they're coming from a different frequency where we're not quite resonant, we're not perceiving them the way that we normally would. So they look different, or they feel different, or they may even be scary, but none of it's scary to me. I just take it as it comes and communicate with it and ask what it's here for, usually, and usually I get an answer. So
It's interesting because Joshua did mention Whitley and Anne both, and their comments on that this seemed to be related to the dead. Speaking of Whitley, I think he still does Dreamland. You should see if you can go on there and talk about John, because I'm sure he has a pretty big throw with that program.
yeah. Well, he adores John, I think, and he's highly aware. I think he's been in contact with John
Oh, excellent.
throughout this, but he's also, booked out months ahead. So,
Makes
but
sense.
you know what? It wouldn't hurt to ask just outright, because some people just, if you're out of sight, you're out of mind. But thank you for that. I'll reach out.
Well, I appreciate you coming on so much to talk about John at the moment, because I've been thinking about him a lot after I heard the news, and I'm so glad that there is an outlet that people can actually do something, as well as praying, of course, which is important,
Yes.
but that people can contribute to John's fundraising campaign on GoFundMe. And you suggested something I thought was wonderful. If people don't have a lot of money, if they can give just a little bit each week for the rest of his treatment, it will help contribute to the ongoing expenses. So I thought that was a great idea.
Yeah, I mean, every little bit helps. You have no idea. The GoFundMe campaign is on all of my social media pages. Um, I haven't put it on my website just because I've been kind of out of commission for a few weeks, but I will put it on my website in the morning. And for people who don't want to contribute to a GoFundMe, on all of my social media pages, also there are other options: Venmo, PayPal, Cash App. There's a PO box if people want to send a check. There's Team Yost T-shirt sales. People are holding raffles. There's all kinds of stuff. So people can go to any of my Debz Shakti social media pages on all those platforms and find that stuff there. And or you can just get in touch with me at my website, which is debzshakti.com, and I'm happy to interact with you and guide you, if you need help on how to contribute.
Well, that's excellent. I've also put the GoFundMe link in the show notes, so anybody watching
Thank
this
you.
on YouTube or listening on after the fact when we're on podcast platforms, they can find it there. But I'd suggest people should follow you on Facebook anyway. And what is your web address again?
It's debzshakti.com, DEBZSHAKTI.com.
That's excellent. And they should also follow you on social. And people can reach out to you if they want to have one-on-one sessions, or
Oh,
if
yeah.
they have any questions about their own experiences. You're able to provide help for those type of things as well, right?
Yeah, absolutely. That's some of my favorite work, is to do the counseling work for people who are not sure what's happening in their life or has happened in their life. And I don't just work with ET and paranormal stuff. I do regular therapy work with people too. But when I host retreats, in fact, God willing, in a few weeks, I'll be back up at Big R, Wisconsin, where a lot of that film was filmed, and co-leading a big CE5 consciousness and contact modalities retreat. So we're going to do all kinds of stuff: psychic mediums, uh, some plant ceremonies, not illegal ones, but things like cacao and things like that. I'm going to do cold plunges. We're going to do yoga, meditation, and of course, sky watches every night. So I'm excited.
And they can find the details about that on your website,
Absolutely.
debzshakti.com.
Yeah.
Excellent. Well, it was such a great pleasure talking to you. I'll message John as I've been doing, but please, when you speak to him on the phone or see him in person, let him know that a lot of people are thinking about him and praying for him, and they're in his corner. So I appreciate it.
Sure
I appreciate
will.
everything you've done, because I've seen you talk more about John's predicament than anybody else. So thank you so
No.
much, Debz, for all you're doing.
Oh, thank you, Dean. Well, like I said, he's my bestest buddy, and outside of my marriage, and I know he has a big job to do still. And the man is a huge family man. He loves his wife. He loves his kids. He has one little granddaughter that I know of, and he heard just 2 weeks before he found out about the cancer, he heard he was getting ready to have another grandchild. You know,
that's
the
awesome.
man wants to live. And so all I can do is just plead with the viewers, give something, please. If you can't give financially, pray, send energy, you know, do what you can. Send your meditations to him and see him as well and vibrantly healthy so he can do his work, because we need him.
Well, he certainly is a wonderful and a very warm man, and I had a wonderful time meeting him. And it would be a terrible loss for him to go. So yes, do whatever you can, people. This is, like I said before, this is a crowdfunding campaign where somebody's life's actually at stake, not just, you know, another comic book or movie or something. This is a really important one. But again, thank you so much, Debz, for coming on, and I'll be in touch with you sometime in the near future. And until I chat to you again, and everybody else, keep it weird.
Thank you, Dean. Thank you, audience. Much love.
Thank you, Debz.